Hi all and welcome to the show. Fairly packed show again. News items from around the world, some pieces from members, some op-ed pieces, and a lot of insight and background like we normally have, and some real solutions. So we'll see how it all goes. So there was a report this week that came out of Virginia. Not much good comes out of Virginia, unfortunately, because of one particular place. But this was 11-year-old Cartier Carey, and lots of kids set up lemonade stands in the summer. For many, it's a rite of passage, and perhaps a first step towards learning what it means to earn your own money. But this particular young man decided it was a chance to do a lot more. And that's because Carey isn't using his profits to open a first savings account or save it up to buy himself a special treat. Instead, he invested it back into the Hampton, Virginia community. So what was his goal? He chose to help single mothers in need. And with all the stress and financial uncertainty brought on by the fake pandemic, Carey decided to focus on the basics: diapers and wipes. And his mum said he doesn't want to spend any of the money on himself. He just wants to continue to keep buying diapers and giving them out each day. Now, the impetus for the project took root while Carey was visiting his grandmother, who lives in one of the area's more economically depressed neighbourhoods. And by the end of July, Carey had raised close to $5,000 via the lemonade stand and from donations, and distributed close to 6,500 diapers. As of September, it's now 22,000, and he's close to achieving his goal of 25,000. Well done, that young man. And hopefully he inspires more people, not only in the black community, but all other communities, to care and share like he has. This is what it's all about. Setting the example that too few so-called adults don't seem capable of. And yet all it requires is a change of mindset. So well done, that young man. Now, a federal court on Thursday blocked a memorandum signed by President Trump seeking to exclude undocumented immigrants from being counted in the census for apportionment, saying such action would violate the statute governing congressional apportionment. So a special 3-judge panel, special being the operative word, out of New York wrote that the president's argument that undocumented immigrants should not be counted runs afoul of a statute saying apportionment must be based on everyone who is a resident of the United States. And the judges found that all residents must be counted for apportionment purposes regardless of their legal status. And the ruling declared the president's July the 21st memorandum to be, quote, an unlawful exercise of the authority granted to the president, unquote. And it also blocked the Commerce Department and Census Bureau from including information about the number of undocumented immigrants in their reports to the president after the count is completed. Now, the ruling is likely to be appealed in the Supreme Court. But what a waste of money, and further examples of jackassery and the way these people operate. You know, it's ridiculous. Now, Dale Ho, director of the ACLU's Voting Rights Project, argued the case and called the ruling a huge victory for voting rights and for immigrants' rights. President Trump has tried and failed yet again to weaponize the census against immigrant communities. The law is clear: every person counts in the census. But not in the election, it doesn't. This is where the sleight of hand comes in. And the ruling came hours after a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to produce internal documents connected to his sudden decision to end the 2020 census count a month earlier than the Census Bureau had planned. And the US District Judge Lucy Coe gave the government 3 days to file all documents and communications between mid-April, when the Bureau said it would extend the count to October the 31st due to the pandemic, and August the 3rd, when it abruptly said the count would end on September the 30th. Now, by law, the state population totals that will be used to reapportion seats in the House of Representatives for the next decade must be delivered to the President by December the 31st of the census year. A series of explosions have lit up the night sky outside of the city of Zarqa, east of Amman, which is the capital of Jordan, and it hit a military ammunition depot in Gahabawawi, and the explosion took place at a warehouse of, quote, unusable mortar bombs, unquote. And this was in the east area of Zarqa and was caused by an electrical short. Now, Petra reported citing Jordan's Minister of Media Affairs, Amjad Adele, and said a massive explosion has reportedly taken place in the city, and locals filming the video can be heard comparing it to the Beirut port blast, saying it's something chemical. I think we all suspect who is behind this event, and I suspect we're not wrong, because they launched another attack. Syria's air defences thwarted an Israeli attack on Aleppo city early Friday morning as multiple missiles were intercepted before reaching their targets. Now, the strikes occurred around 1:30 a.m. local time on Friday, citing a military source who noted that the country's air defences had repelled most of the enemy missiles. Of course, you'll recall that Russia installed missile defence systems for this very reason. Now, the source pinned the attack on Israel. However, Tel Aviv has yet to comment on the incident, and there were no immediate reports of casualties or damage. Now, the news agency shared footage of the blast on social media, while an unconfirmed photo purporting to show smoke rising from an area around Al-Safara, which is a town in Aleppo's countryside, also made the rounds online. Now, the attack comes amid a possible escalation in attacks by Israel on alleged Iranian targets inside Syria. Israeli jets reportedly struck a military site near Homs earlier this month, while a missile attack targeting military posts south of Damascus in late August killed 2 soldiers and wounded 7, according to Syria's defense ministry. Now, Syria's missile defences have had some success in repelling the attacks after the several missiles launched by Israeli warplanes from Lebanese airspace were shot down in April. Now, while Tel Aviv seldom confirms its strikes on Syria, in a rare admission last year, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu acknowledged bombing hundreds of Iranian and Hezbollah targets in the country throughout its years-long war. These people have to be stopped. They are the greatest threat to peace and humanity. They are parasites and behind much of what is wrong with the world today. This was a fairly interesting analyst report that came out of Deutsche Bank, or whatever way you want to pronounce it. Douchebag Bank is probably the best way. It was kind of interesting that they would have insights into global things. And this report stated that the 4-decade era of globalization may be coming to an end, and we could be entering what they called the age of disorder, which will reshape both economies and politics. And one of the key characteristics of the new era will be the reversal of unfettered globalization. And a team of analysts led by strategist Jim Reed predicted, and he said, while we saw the best combined asset price growth of any era in history, with equity and bond returns very strong across the board since 1980, the age of disorder is likely to break this trend. And he cited deteriorating US and China relations is another theme out of 8 of them that he defined. And he said that will define the next distinct era of modern times, which is hastened but not caused by the pandemic. And the analysts noted that the Chinese economy will be closing the gap with the US and could finally outperform it by the end of the decade. A clash of cultures and interests therefore beckons, he said, especially as China grows closer to being the largest economy in the world. And he said, unfortunately, this economic standoff is unlikely to trigger a real this economic standoff is unlikely to trigger a real military conflict between the two states, as usually happens when a rising power tries to challenge the ruling one. And the economic war with tariffs, sanctions and attacks in the technology sphere will go on instead, the analysts believe. And no matter who wins the 2020 presidential election in the US, the rift between the two superpowers will grow. That's because of clowns, nothing to do with governments. And it said, while the coronavirus crisis has already put the European economy at crossroads, the bank says that the next decade may become a make or break decade for Europe. Among other factors defining the future are higher debt and helicopter money, which is distributing cash to the public, becoming mainstream. That's your universal basic income, what they are referring to, and the vouchers they're giving out in Europe, particularly the UK. They're not backed. And these are policies which are likely to spike inflation. Inequality may even get worse in the post-COVID-19 world. Of course it will. That was the idea. Before the backlash and reversal takes place. Inequality is closely connected with the intergenerational gap, but the analysts expect that the number of younger voters will exceed those born before 1980 by the end of the decade. And he said this could lead to major policy changes in many spheres, from taxes to climate. And such a shift in the balance of power could include a harsher inheritance tax regime, less income protection for pensioners, more property taxes, along with greater income and corporate taxes, and all-round more redistributive policies. And they said, finally, the next 10 years will show whether the exponential rise of the value of tech companies was worth it. The bank says that they will either start a technology revolution or prove to be the second dot-com bubble. One hope it's the latter for me. This new technology is dangerous to us all. You know, I'm now seeing what I was warning of last year, certainly in Clowns and Panic, and also previously. None of this technology is currently beneficial to us in the short or long term, and all of it is weaponized against us by the hidden hand people who run all of our governments. Governments need our help. They are mere puppets in a wider game too few know of and even less understand. But will they have the courage to speak up? They will if more people make them accountable and then support the people who speak out, regardless of party politics. Democrat US Representative Tulsi Gabbard is again raising heckles on the left. I guess she doesn't have a right, maybe. And this time being attacked as a QAnon follower because she blasted Netflix for airing the controversial movie called Cuties, which she considers child porn. Now, the broadside hit came from Melissa Ryan, whose firm Card Strategies organises activism to combat disinfo and extremism. And Ryan tweeted Friday night that Tulsi is going QAnon is the least surprising thing to happen in 2020. But I did warn of this creep of acceptance of pedophilia into the public arena would ramp up. And it has. That show, Cuties, is a public test exercise. That's what it's about. It's a public test to see how many will rail against it. And this is how they work and test the public. If a few complain, they add more and then a bit more. But what I'm hearing is that it's backfired on Netflix badly, as many thousands voted against it by withdrawing their subscriptions. That's the way to do it. Hit them in their pockets. They don't like it. Now, over a dozen members of the special counsel Robert Mueller's Russiagate investigating team, quote, accidentally, unquote, wiped their phones before they could be inspected and lost the phone of disgraced FBI lawyer Lisa Page with anti-Trump texts. Now, Mueller and his team were tasked with investigating accusations of President Donald Trump's collusion with Russia during the 2016 election, but found no evidence of it. And in their final report, they tried to insinuate that Trump was guilty of obstruction of justice, but stopped short of outright saying so. Now, the 87-page document released by the Justice Department on Thursday under the Freedom of Information Act reveals that Mueller's investigators accidentally or deliberately wiped their devices when the DOJ Inspector General asked for them. Federal records show that Mueller Deputy Andrew Weissman claims to have accidentally wiped, via wrong passwords, at least 2 phones detailing his activity during the anti-Trump probe. James Qualls' phone wiped itself. Greg Andre also made the same wrong password claim. And at least 12 officials whose names are redacted claim to have accidentally erased all data from the phones. 5 officials are mentioned by name: Andrew Weissman, James Qualls, Greg Andre, Kyle Freeney and Rush Atkinson, and their phones allegedly wiped themselves or reset after too many wrong password entries. Yeah, right. In total, as many as 31 phones may have been affected, including the devices that had been reassigned. Yep, this is what they do. And with no valid oversight committee of any note or power, have gotten away with it for far too long. Why haven't they been arrested yet? Yes, you, Q. Where are the arrests? People have committed major crimes that for the average person on the street, they'd have been locked up awaiting trial, and yet these people still walk our streets. You know, sort it out. Go and arrest them. Put them in jail until their trial. Deal with them and let's all get on with fixing this country, which, in case you hadn't noticed, is in a complete and utter mess.